Since growing up on his family's farm near Lyon, France, Daniel Boulud has remained true to his roots throughout his illustrious career. An early foundation of respect and appreciation for seasonal local ingredients would later become an integral part of Boulud's business plans and culinary mantra. Before launching his career in Washington, D.C. in the early 80s, Boulud worked his ways through some of the best kitchens in France, highlighting among his resume or positions alongside French culinary giants Georges Blanc, Roger Verger, and Michel Gérard. Along the way, he developed a very close bond with the legendary chef Paul Bocuse. During his time in Washington, D.C., the late chef Jean-Louis Paladin of Jean-Louis at the Watergate suggested that Boulud move to New York, where he went on to work as the executive chef at Le Cirque. 7 years later, Boulud launched what would become his flagship restaurant, Daniel, in Manhattan. Over the years, it has won countless James Beard Awards, Michelin stars, and New York Times stars, and has become a world-renowned destination restaurant. This year, the restaurant Daniel celebrates its 20th anniversary. This is not an easy accomplishment, especially when you have 14 other amazing restaurants around the world. He just released his 8th cookbook, Daniel, My French Cuisine, which delivers a definitive yet personal take on his love of French food. In a recent review, Russ Parsons of the LA Times wrote, "This is one seriously gorgeous book, and it has the air about it of a magnum opus. You get the feeling that this is a summation of everything Boulud has been working towards since he moved to the US in 1982. And Thomas Keller, chef owner of the French Laundry, wrote, "Just when you think you know everything about one of your closest friends, he surprises you with anecdotes, reflections, and insight. French cuisine is in Daniel's blood, but this book, the most personal he has written, goes well beyond the traditional rules and codes of French cooking. It's an intimate look at Daniel as a chef and a vivid portrait of Daniel as a person, highlighting the art and science in his iconic and regional cooking and the humility that guides everything he does." Appearing alongside Daniel tonight is Chris Ying, the editor-in-chief of Lucky Peach magazine. But before we welcome our guests to the stage, please enjoy this short video about Chef Boulud and the book. Okay, we have to go.
Then we have, where are we on 18? 18, I need a second course, chef. Everyone stop! Okay, now I think it's ready.
So without further ado, please welcome Chris Ying and Daniel Boulud to the stage.
Thank you. Let me take my jacket off. We're gonna be here for an hour.
So, this video gives us some idea. Well, thanks everybody for coming. Sorry. didn't see you all out there. I was just going to launch into it with Danielle here.
Good evening, everybody.
This video gives you some idea of the experience at Danielle, but we are not among San Francisco is not among the fortunate cities to have a Daniel Boulud restaurant here. So maybe you could start off by giving us a sense of the experience at Danielle. What do you try to convey to your guests? What do you want them to experience?
Well, first, thank you, Chris, for doing this for me. I forgot to put my phone off. Daniel is celebrating his 20-year anniversary this year, and I think every year became an evolution. And the first year I opened, of course, I was scared like shit to stay in business, so we were piling them up one over each other. The restaurant was super busy and high energy and great food and like you say before, dishes coming out of the cuff like this because so-and-so came so many times and we don't know what to cook for him anymore, so we constantly reinvent, a lot of regulars. And little by little, I wanted to do Daniel, and it has always been the restaurant I dream of, and I loved it every step of the way. But I think today it's becoming a great classic, and yet very much with its time. Great service, great food, great wine, great decor, great ambiance.
How do you think it differs from, say, the experience? What are you trying to say to your diner at Danielle versus at Café Boulud or at any of the other restaurants that are not the flagship 20-year-old?
Well, the thing is that when I had one restaurant, you could have Bar Boulud in it, you could have Café Boulud, you could have Boulud Sud, you could have DBJB. I didn't care. I cooked everything I wanted to cook. It was not like, oh, I need to be the best restaurant in the world, so I better cook very miniatures and be careful. No, it was very convivial and great dishes, but very soulful. I could cook tripe, calfheads, rognon, and everything like this. Now, then, the more I have opened different type of restaurant, the more I have shed that out of Daniel. Mm-hmm. And so now Daniel is certainly more crème de la crème than he was before, where he was only heavy cream.
So, I mean, it's interesting that you put it like that and sort of talk about the evolution and how it's changed into something that's more personal, I think. And this book is called, Danielle, My French Cuisine. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting that it's called My French Cuisine, and I really stuck on that subtitle. And I wanted to know what makes it, your French cuisine different than, my French cuisine, or which I know what makes it different. You're not
French yet, Chris, but I can teach you how to be French.
I know what makes it different than my French cuisine. But
what would you have called it if there wasn't?
Just not Chris's French cuisine is what it would have been called. But and there's a sort of image in America of what French cuisine is, and I think it's really important that we talk about what makes your cuisine, and it's not just
Well, the problem
French.
with me is that I'm stuck being French. Even after 30 years in America, I'm still thinking French a lot. I am communicating a lot in French at the restaurant, and I'm inspired by French cuisine. And so even if I have dishes like this one, where it's a cured, this is a cured flute with the chiseau bavarois and a miso gelée and edamame and the beets, so and a little bit of red chiseau. So this has nothing to do with French cuisine, but yet I think the composition, the bavarois, the fish, the seasoning, the balance. I was not trying to do anything Japanese, but trying to be delicately French. Mm-hmm. And this, the influence of other cuisine in French cuisine has always been that. You saw it often with chefs traveling to Japan, chefs traveling to Europe or America. also, and coming back and making sometimes dishes. There was a chef who was making a barbecue, or Paul Bocuse was making a barbecue squab with a barbecue sauce with ketchup and all that, because he felt, that's my French cuisine, but I just came back from America. Let me make a barbecue squab.
I think it's really interesting because a lot of the cooks that are popular now, the chefs who are sort of young and getting a lot of press now, are essentially reinventing what you have already invented, which is taking a cuisine, an old, classical, historical cuisine, and trying to bring an American influence to it or integrate their environment to it. But you've been doing this already for so long. It's just because it's French, it seems like.
I don't know if everything is French. Today, it's a blur line between where the inspiration come from, and how is it, the application, the seasoning, is it smoked, is it not smoked? Usually when anything of a Gallic fashion where it's smoked, it's not so French, except in Alsace where we smoke stuff. But otherwise, it's but there's a lot of chefs in America today who are cooking a very gutsy cuisine as well. I grew up with that kind of food, and I think I'm very excited to see sometime.
When you say gutsy, you mean like guts, not like brave.
guts, but also gutsy in a sense that it's not always predictable in a restaurant to have this kind of food. And a lot of people work with fire now, and different type of fire, which I think is very interesting. There's chefs who also like to inspire themselves from deep America. Like you go to Charleston, Carolina, and Sean Brock, I think the cooking he's doing is very creative, and yet I think it's very soulful.
So that's today, but the America you arrived in from Lyon was much different. What was the New York food scene? What did French food look like when you got to Washington and then to New York when you first arrived?
The French restaurants who existed were very predictable. They were they were all more or less with the same kind of menu. They didn't have so much individuality and personality, but they were all very successful, and I think they all had their way of having a clientele for the food they were making. But the 80s was interesting. It was maybe the most interesting part because it was the beginning of the lift here. And I often say Jean-Louis Paladin to me was certainly the one who did the most in this movement because he had a small restaurant, 30 seats, just like you see some of the young chefs now starting. A kitchen, you could hear everything what the chef say because he was very small next to it. But the restaurant was a little, it was the basement of the Watergate by the garage. They didn't know what to do with that space. They gave it to Jean-Louis. He made it one of the best restaurants in the world. And the thing is, he was writing his menu every day. Every day, he will handwrite his menu, plus he took some calligraphy class, so he made beautiful menus. And so you sit down, he was in control. You weren't in control of deciding what you wanted to eat. And he had only 2 tasting menus. It was A or B, the option, and he was cooking incredible food. But he's the one who also convinced all the farmers to grow stuff for him. There were other chefs all over the country already. There were, of course, Jeremy Attauer here, and there were Alice Water, and there were Wolfgang after in the 80s, and with Chino Farm and all that. But for him, Jean-Louis in Washington, he felt a little bit left alone there. And so he wanted to do it like in France. And he went to Maine, and in the middle of the night, with a silk screen, silk net, and in the river in the middle of the night with a flashlight to try to catch pibal, the baby eels, where they are so small, but they are coming from it's only 2 weeks a year in the spring. They come down the river, and you have to catch them by the thousands. And if you are lucky, if you get 2 pounds or 3 pounds, but there's a lot of baby eels there. Today, I think this whole thing is difficult to get because the Japanese have have found a way to get them, and they take them home and raise them in Japan for eels, not for baby eels. But he was like just crazy about. I mean, I had my 30th birthday at Jean-Louis, and every course I had, he either brought me the live animal or just freshly killed. And so I started with a she crab soup. So she crab is a very tiny crab. You get on the coast of Massachusetts a little bit and Maine, and he made me a fantastic soup with that. But he brought me first a basket of she crab and throw them on the table, and the crab was going like this. And he said, "This is gonna be your first course."
Right.
So after that, they got the crab back in the kitchen.
And then 20 years later, Rene Redzepi was throwing ants at you on the table. So it's just like
exactly. No
throwing
matter
animals
do
at
ants
you.
now. But then after second course was the lamprey. And I don't know, have you ever had lamprey?
I've not had lamprey.
Okay, so lamprey is basically a fish who suck everything, including blood from other fish. That's mostly what they do best. And so inside the lamprey, so the lamprey can be easily, at least 3 foot long and a good 4-inch wide or 3-inch wide. So it's very strong. It's like an eel. So he came in the dining room with the big towels holding this thing, and the lamprey was moving like this, and the mouth was opening.
Oh, God.
And he came to the table, and he said, "I'm going to make the civet of lamprey now." And you know, the civet of lamprey, so he braised the lamprey in slice, and you finish the sauce with the blood of the lamprey. I mean, that's the only fish you can finish the sauce with the blood often. And that's kind of weird, but you have to be from the Pays Basque to like that. But Jean-Louis was like that. He was just like so passionate about the ingredient. And all this stuff, he found it all by having little suppliers here and there.
But that's almost, when you first arrived, that's a outlier case. That's kind of unheard of. I mean, in New York, you said, I think, the idea of nouvelle cuisine has not even reached America.
Because, I mean, the problem is that America was not even behind France because the 70s, everything happened with nouvelle cuisine. Is that I'm talking about the French restaurant, but that was kind of the school of the beginning of what was happening. The restaurant there were more like cruise ship cooking, where many of the chefs came during the cruise ship and the World Fair. At the World Fair in, I guess it was not 39, but 50 something. There were a lot of chefs who came. Hundreds of chefs.
And their style.
And they stayed in America. They never took the boat back. So, so they started to open old restaurants in the 60s. And so those restaurants were a little more classic. They were importing all their products from France. They couldn't function. They couldn't be French in America without the French product. So haricot vert, Dover sole, turbo, and all that. And so, for me, arriving from France, having been to the school of all those chefs who are transforming French cuisine in the 70s, I felt, and I had to sort of identify myself with who was trying to transform anything here, and that was Jean-Louis, and there was Yannick Cam in Washington, and then in New York, Alain Sandorance was at the Méridien, but that was after that. Soon after me came Jean-Georges. Thomas Keller, where Thomas was working with me at the Polo Lounge in 82, 83, and he was chef de partie at the Poisson with Alfred Portal, with Bill Yosses, and so it was a fantastic, it was fantastic moment. And every day you had the suppliers who were surprising you with something. We had this woman in the Bronx who was growing herbs and bringing basket of herbs every day to us, fresh herbs, and we started to, get the best out of what we could get, and then get the rest from France, at least.
So you knew right away that you didn't want that you were going to integrate New York and the surrounding area into your cuisine. It was going to be, you were going to try to import haricot vert and Dover sole. It was always going to be.
Well, until they knew how to grow haricot vert here, there was no other option.
What part? does New York play in your cooking? Like, you know, you've said, I think you're either a French cook with a New York soul, or you're a New York cook with a French soul.
Yeah.
Would your restaurants have been, would you have been successful trying to do the same thing in France? How
Well,
important is New York to you?
I think in France it would have not been the same. I think in France it would have not been the same journey for sure. Completely different. I didn't have to worry about you know, the setup of suppliers and the setup of how to get ingredient. I mean, that was not the case. But I don't think I would have been the same chef if I've stayed in France. I think I would have made a wonderful restaurant and kept working at it. Mm-hmm. But there's definitely, that's where the American chef with a French soul come.
So how do you approach the creation of a dish? What is your process for thinking about cooking something new at the restaurant?
It all depends. I mean, it's not, we sit down when we do the menus and we bring ideas. We have an idea of maybe what kind of main ingredient we like to use. And we discuss what are we going to do with it, what kind of flavoring, I mean, what kind of application we want to give to it, and what kind of technique, and does it fit? I mean, I have a restaurant à la carte, so it has to also balance with, I mean, basically each dishes has to be original from the other. So you don't borrow ingredients 3 times all over the menus. And so you try to make a grid of everything we're gonna get for the next 2 months. Vegetable, fish, shellfish, and seeing what we haven't done lately. And then when we start to sort of compose the choice of what's gonna drive the dish, then after we go into test of ideas. I mean, is it gonna be inspiration with the Middle Eastern seasoning, or then are we staying closer to that, or are we just using it for one thing? Texture, of course, and cooking technique after. And you know, if you have one item with grill, do we want to grill everything? No, I mean, there's one roast, one grill, one on the rotisserie, one braise maybe, and try to have a different way of exploring many different possibilities for the menu.
Mm-hmm. As somebody who, you know, works on cookbooks and is a great cookbook admirer and collector, it's rare that you come across a book like this that is trying to capture an important moment in culinary history. Like I can say that having been asked to write and having, you know, written things that are sort of just like written for the sake of, oh, we need a book about this.
Yeah, I know.
You know, this
No, that's why the book, it was about capturing the moment right now at Daniel in the kitchen. And I think I did the book also for the pride of my team, who I think are amazing. And, you know, we live together, we create together, we cook together, we work so much and spend so much time together, and it's important, and they feel a reward sometimes. So that, at least for them to see the food we make in the restaurant, to see the team, immortalized in the book, for them it means everything.
Why was this the right,
and it means a lot to me and to my family also. I think my parents in France, all my family, my friends, I want to show them where I am today with Daniel.
I mean, in the book you talk about the very first thing you did when you made your first paycheck from, you know, peeling carrots and washing dishes when you were 14 years old was go and spend it on.
My first paycheck was $1 a month because it was 5 francs as an apprentice.
So you saved a little bit of money, and then you bought
I saved no money. My parents were giving me money every week to become an apprentice. But it was like at school. Basically, it was like slavery with a dime.
It was a tip, but you
throw you a dime.
You spent whatever money you had on cookbooks. You bought books first, and so
yes.
I wonder, you know, what makes this the right moment for the Daniel cookbook? It seems like cookbooks are very important to you.
Yeah, this is cookbook number 8, and the first cookbook I did, Cooking with Daniel Boulud. When you read throughly, there's a lot of fun recipe to do. And 20 years ago, I published that book. I was during my time at the Cirque, and I think it captured a little bit a cross between what I was doing at Le Cirque and the dishes I like, plus also what can I do to people, for people to cook at home, and who had nothing to do with what I was doing in the restaurant.
And in,
But
I mean, in this book, you've included recipes for the big hits, the greatest recipes at Daniel, and you haven't watered them down. They're done at the restaurant.
No, but at least we had the, we were smart enough to break them down by segment of preparation and production very carefully. So that means then for anyone at home, because I don't think we are full of chefs here, but anyone at home who want to grab the book and do something, it's easy. Like for example, that was the picture of the fluke, marinated fluke, citrus marinated fluke, and that you can have the fluke, you can have the shiso, and you can have the beets, and you can make something very nice. Maybe you don't have to go crazy doing this entire thing like this, but if you have time, it's good to do the whole thing. It's not that complicated.
I think, the book is valuable for reasons even beyond, and like if you never cooked out of this book, I would say it's still one of the most valuable books you can own, both for this part we'll get to later with Bill Buford, but also the home recipes. And this is documenting, like I said, an important moment in cuisine. But what, that idea that it is very difficult to recreate that entire dish, start to finish, is the reason we go to eat at your restaurant.
Plus, I will not like to see it in another restaurant either.
Right.
You know what I mean? And today with the internet, you see right away who's copying who.
Right.
And so I think it's just like inspire. I mean, every cookbook is an inspiration, I think. It's a journey through the mind of the chef. It's a journey to the restaurant, and I mean, every cookbook I see, it's something very personal for everyone. And so this one, I think, I wanted to call it my French cuisine because for once I could not deny it, and that's what it is.
Take a little credit. But it is difficult. And I think that your kitchen at Daniel has produced some of, when you talk to other chefs in New York or in San Francisco, and I was in Vancouver 2 weeks ago, and somebody heard the name of one of your former chef de cuisines who hadn't worked at your restaurant for 10 years, and they were amazed at this idea. And you've produced some of these, the most hardened, skilled, technical cooks that live.
Well,
and it's because, undeniably there is some difficulty factor in pulling this off.
There's
right?
a lot of pressure working at Daniel. It's also, I think, when we have a cook at a meat station or at a fish station, the pressure of, cooking with precision, and especially also, roasting properly, braising properly, and having a very good eye touch and feel for what you do.
And yet, as difficult as it is, and I know it is difficult in that kitchen, you still have these tenured cooks and chefs who have been there for 10 years, 20 years. How do you, especially in New York, people move around all the time. How do you keep them?
That's why we try to pay them well. We try to compensate them well, better than I was, for sure. And also, I want to make sure that people feel secure with us. They feel also that there'll be opportunity for them. And many, I have many restaurants, but many of the restaurants have chefs who have worked with me for many years, 5, 7, 10 years, and they keep rotating. I open 3 restaurants, putting sous chefs who were never chef before. They were sous chef at Daniel or sous chef at Café or other restaurant, and they never really were chef before, and I throw them on stage and they become chef de cuisine. So we give them good assistance, but they know me, they know my team, they know the people we're working for, and they know what I expect from them. And I think we give them the surrounding to make sure they succeed. And if they don't, they have to go. That's the problem, is then we put you on top, but you fall if you don't make it. It's, usually they're well aware of what they're taking. And
so I spend time with Dave Chang, and one of his favorite things to do is lament this idea of the death of fine dining, and he sort of talks about how cooks these days can't pull off fine dining, and he's talking about your restaurant. He's talking about there aren't people who can do what you guys do anymore, and I'm not going to argue with Dave.
No, no, absolutely, it's totally right. But it's not the death of fine dining. The problem is the death of investing in a restaurant with the risk of failing, unless you're a chef who was really. I mean, I took gradually my risk, but the first restaurant I did, I raised a lot of money, considering it was just a 80-seat restaurant, 90-seat restaurant, and I did it, just shoot to the top right away. I wasn't going to go anywhere. And, but at the time, if you had ambition, I think the setting had to be comfortable and had to be sort of elegant, modern or not modern. But there were an investment with it, and big investment is in the kitchen as well. But today, I think for a lot of young chefs, they can provide amazing food with a low investment. But long term, I think they want to keep evolving with it. They want to keep creating things a little bit bigger, better. Not bigger, but better and grander. And fine dining, it's about service. Fine dining, it's about food. Fine dining is about wine service as well. And fine dining is about knowledge for the staff to be very knowledgeable. And fine dining, it's, I mean, you are taking a journey and a moment of refinement in your life. And I think that I see in New York, I mean, I don't think my restaurant, Daniel, could be in every city in America, but in the top city maybe, but in New York it fits itself perfectly there. And I mean, you see, for example, Le Bernardin, Jean-Georges, they're all fine dining, and they're not going anywhere.
Right. I think that people, or I mean, I have had a hard time. It took me a long time to understand sort of the difference between just restaurant dining and fine dining, and it truly is sort of a different experience entirely. It's like going to a movie versus going to the theater. You're seeing something very different. And in the book, there are 10 or 12 essays that you've written sort of about single topics. There's bread and there's cheese, but there's also service and wine. And these aren't things necessarily that every restaurant needs to consider.
No, because some restaurants don't have the depth of one cellar, and they don't. But they all have. I think every chef who is serious about his cooking, I think, need a sommelier to be able to create a program around his ambition with food. And it don't have to be all wine. It can be sake, it can be beer, it can be. But at least there is an interesting program for any interesting chef. He wants an interesting program for himself.
But you also have a specific clientele that can come into Daniel and be requesting some very high-ticket wines and wanting an experience that is, I mean, Robert Parker will come in and have,
But people are very, Robert Parker, but Robert Parker will more come with a group of friends. And the last time they did an horizontal of 82. So that means that they had 25 different chateaux from Bordeaux, 82. And they had plenty of four or five bottles of it. There were about 50 people. Anyway, they drank, I don't know, I think they drank 160 bottles of 82 or something for lunch. So they had.
So you have to be equipped.
When it's 82, you don't get drunk, you don't get sick, you don't have headache. I mean, you can drink a lot. I mean, I can drink 2 bottles of 82 and still talk to you. I mean, there's no problem. That's a big difference with a younger wine who's going to start to hit you very early.
That's the difference. I don't think I could drink 2 bottles of 82 and talk to you.
Maybe we'll do that in New York when you come.
I think that when Dave talks about, say, the death of fine dining, I don't think he's talking about a lack of need for it or a lack of desire for it, but you seem to want to hold on to your chefs and your cooks for 10 years, 20 years. You want them to stay forever.
I love them.
Is that because, is it getting harder to find someone who could step in?
No, I think I think they have, as I say, I take very good care of them, and I make sure that they are happy themselves. They have a good, they have a good life, and they have a good team. You know, they have a support to your chef is very important. But of course, then we have cooks who are there for 1 year, for 2 years, for 3 years, and the one who want to stick with us, we want them to stick with us. Some of them, we are happy that they are going on the road. They might come back to us, and that also happened.
There is a sort of
And we help them also, you know, if they need any help. And that's what I'm telling often to the chef is that I always work 2 years mostly 2 years for my chef in France. But I always ask him for my next move. I always ask him to make the call and help me to get my next move. And we do that to the young chef as well. I think it's important that they travel and they learn the way I travel and I learn.
And, you know, there's a sort of legendary chef that people talk about, especially in New York circles and sort of all around the country, that came from your kitchen. And it's a story that has fascinated us at Lucky Peach and I think speaks to a lot of cooks. And I wonder if you could tell people about Alex Lee and who he is and a little bit about his story.
Absolutely. And Alex Lee, I was at Macy's, I think, let me see, that was 87 maybe, 1987. I was at Le Cirque, chef at Le Cirque, and I was doing a demo at Macy's. Macy's had a kitchen at Macy's, was called the Gustibus. And, you know, 60 people came and you do a demo, typical demo things with a little taste of. And Alex Lee was in the crowd, and then after that he came to me and he said, "Chef, I would love to work for you." So I said, "Well, you know, stop by and see me one day." And so one day he came and see me, we sit down, and he started as a line cook, stay about 2 years, and 2.5 years, and then he wanted to go to France. So I sent him to Alain Ducasse. He went to Alain Ducasse in Monte Carlo, and from there he went to Spain, Barcelona, the Arzac and Barasategui, and then in San Sebastian as well. Not in Barcelona, San Sebastian, Arzac, and Barasategui, and in Barcelona also he did a couple of restaurants there. And he went to Italy, spent time also at the Santini family, at Del Pescatore, and other chefs. And so he didn't waste his time. He worked very hard in France. Now he's coming back from France in '92, and that's when I purchased Daniel, the location, to try to open Daniel there. And he came from France, and he didn't know what he was going to do. And I needed a chef de cuisine, but I didn't know who to put there. And Alex Lee was Chinese-American, only worked in France he worked with me before and worked in France a little bit. But I think he was always very French in his method of cooking, in his understanding of cooking, and he really was very good. But even before, so anyway, let's finish Alex Lee, and I'll talk about the chef before Alex Lee. So Alex Lee, very young, first job as chef. So I'm opening my first restaurant, and he's having his first job as chef. So now we are both scared, you know what I mean? But we are just crazy also. And the kitchen is very intense, and I am piling things over, dishes. Like, for example, we'll have easily 10 appetizer or 12 appetizer, 12 main course, plus I will do special, plus on-the-run dishes. And you could really feel the energy in the kitchen and the pressure constantly. And Alex was just, he was a guerrero there also with me, and but very talented, I think a lot of chefs who came to Daniel learn a lot also from Alex. So that's the important thing, is that you don't want to learn only from the chef who owned the restaurant, but from the 2 or 3 underneath who are really bringing something too. And we stay 11 years with Alex. And now Jean-François at Daniel, has been, out of the 20 years, Jean-François has been 9 years at Daniel, but he has been 17 years with me total, the chef de cuisine, and he became the chef at Daniel after Alex.
And the part that I think, shocks people, but I don't think shocks you at all, is that, Alex had passed through some of the greatest kitchens in Europe, had trained with you, had established himself as, one of the best chefs in New York, had this sort of undeniable skill, and then decided he that wasn't for him anymore, and went to go have like a calmer lifestyle.
And I think at the time, I don't know if I could have compete with the offer he got, and he made a decision to leave for his family because he had already 2 kids, and he felt and he wanted to be with his wife and his kids, and the only way to see them was to work in one of the most fanciest golf club outside of New York, and he had a very good offer from them of hours of work, but also of salary, and I think it was difficult for me to convince him to stay. And I understood also that his family was more the biggest reason than really quitting the restaurant business. And but I always stay in touch with Alex, and I think he's happy of his decision because he saw his kid grow up. And our business is not. It's about sacrifice.
Right.
You sacrifice your family. You sacrifice everything for the sake of the pleasure of cooking or giving pleasure to people.
I think that
we all know, chef, how much hours we work.
Yeah. I think in other of your books, in Letters to a Young Chef, which is, if you haven't read, is, required reading essentially for anybody who's thinking about making the crazy decision to enter the
Did you
chef
read it?
business. Yes. And it'll terrify anybody who's thinking about it. But no, it's actually very inspirational. But, from the very beginning, you make it clear that it is a sacrifice, that you are not just choosing a career that you're going to try out and dabble in, you're making a commitment to something.
Of course.
And I wonder if you were writing a letter to the young Daniel Boulud, what would you say?
I don't know. Don't do what I've done, but do it quicker, do it faster, in a sense of younger. It took me a while. I come from, I'm a farm boy outside of Lyon. I grew up on a farm. I never made money as a cook. I never made money, even when I came in the beginning to America. My 2 jobs, even the 3rd job was not enough to open a restaurant, no way. At Le Cirque, I was getting a little bit more money. I could make a saving, that's about it. So I started to make a saving, I was maybe 30, a little bit, but that was not to open a restaurant because it would have not happened. And I had to prove to everyone that I was a good chef before I could open my own place. And I was always dreaming to open my own place. But today, I think you see chefs finding ways to get a garage and put a kitchen and wood fire ovens and a couple of tables and serve you wonderful food in a very, very inexpensive way of going in business. And I think I love those chefs.
You would have gone the casual route instead.
But I wanted to talk back to the French I am, in a way, and how unconventionally French I am. Because the first, I have been in America 30 years, and the first 8 plus 10, that's 18 years, or yeah, almost, 17, 18 years. My chef de cuisine were Asian. And so the first one was Cambodian, but we came to France when he was 16, I think, and in the middle of the war of Cambodia, he was the lucky one to get a ticket into the helicopter, American helicopter, to leave and then to come to France. He had family there. And he learned to cook with Alain Sanderance. He learned to cook with Trois Gros. He learned to cook with some of the great restaurateurs or chefs in France. And and he had a very delicate touch, and he had a very unconventional approach to French cuisine, but very French still, and very well-trained and disciplined. And so when I took the first job at the Plaza Athénée, opening the Plaza Athénée Le Régence in '83, I needed a chef de cuisine. And Sota was the sous chef for Alain Passard at the time, when Alain Passard was at the Duc d'Enghien. And a friend of mine in New York said, you know, I think I have the chef de cuisine for you. I don't know if you think I'm crazy, but this is the guy you should have. And, you know, being an Asian in France was a little bit outcasted. You will never be, I mean, you will never be. You could have been, but it was not easy to be always respected for your talent or the chance to become the chef, maybe. One of them I saw was a Japanese chef for Alain Saint-Laurent. He was a Japanese chef at the time, Tony Kai. But Sota, I don't know why, he accepted the offer of my friend to come to America. So I go to France, and I take the train from Lyon to Paris to meet him. And I meet this very shy, small man, and very shy, but I say, God, I mean, I'm taking him to New York. It's going to be scary because he's gonna freak out. But I liked him so much. We had a lunch with Alain Passard, and Alain Passard was very happy. He's a good friend also. He was very happy, and he was coming with me in America. He was great. He was supporting the whole thing. So Sota came, and we spent 8 years together. Then he became the chef of Le Cirque when I left, because when I opened my restaurant, that's why I put Alex, because he was never a chef de cuisine. But Sota was already too expensive for me to bring him with my restaurant. So I said to Sota, I'm sorry, I would love to take you, but I can't afford you.
I want to get to, I think, my favorite part of the book before we run out of time for this. The second part of this book is a series of 15, 12 recipes that you cooked with Bill Buford. Can you explain this part?
Absolutely. This is iconic dishes. So Bill Buford, if anyone don't know, but Bill Buford is a famous writer. He wrote Among the Tog, and Among the Tog was basically, he lived many years in London, but 1 year he decided for a year or two to live with the hooligan. So he penetrated a gang and lived with the hooligan. And, you know, he was in and out of it, but he was going to the games. He was in London in order to write the book. And so you have to be a little nuts to do that.
Oh. This
because
is like
if they know
soccer
that you are not,
right.
If you are not one, then they'll really take care of you.
These are like the Hells Angels of soccer fans.
Yeah,
basically.
exactly. And after that, he got interested in food. So he was the editor-in-chief of The New Yorker for quite a while. And he was interested in food. He went to work with Mario Batali. One night he was, I think, drinking with Mario, and he asked Mario if he could come in his kitchen at Babbo, and he spent time at Babbo being an Italian cook, or at least helping, watching,
pretending,
learning, and then he felt like, well, I mean, okay, it's fine, but I need to go to Italy in order to understand maybe a little bit more about. So he went to work for an Italian butcher. He went to work in Florence, and he wrote the book Heat. For the last 4 years, he came to me 4 years ago, and he was working with Michel Richard in Washington about French cuisine. He was interested by Michel, and Michel Richard is a great technician and a wonderful chef. And Bill had a good time the relationship was good with Michel, so he spent some time there. And then he came to see me and say, well, I decided that I want to move to France. I will move my kids and my family and move to France. And he said, but I think I would like to go to Lyon. What do you think? So I said, okay, I'll set you up. So I'll set him up. He went to work for a year at La Mer Brasier as an apprentice. They were making him peel potatoes and cook the staff meal and give him pressure and all that. But then after, he spent 4 years in France, in Lyon, because he has a book coming out next year. And it's going to be an interesting book about the French, but about the French when you dig deep. kind of. And about French cuisine, but really cool. And so I called Bill and I said, you know, I'm doing a cookbook and I want to do, there's a portion, I want to do something in the book more than just the recipe of Daniel, because I think every chef does a nice cookbook for himself. But I don't think it's soulful enough for me when it talk about where I come from versus where I am today. So the first part of Daniel is where I am. The second part is where I come from. And this is where I come from. This kind of food where I dream of making, I have made, I have learned to make when I was very young. And so the session was with Bill. Every morning we'll get together at 7:30 in the kitchen, 8, because we are closed for lunch at Daniel. And I told him, I said, you're not going to have your pad and your pan and you watch me cooking. You're going to cook with me, next to me, the same thing than I am cooking. So whatever we do, we're going to make it double. And we have a camera recording everything, so you can go home with the tape and look over if you want to write and all that. So that's how we made the session together. And I wanted him to cook with me and give me his word, his contradiction, his argument with me, just where those dishes will take him. Mm-hmm. I was more interested about seeing where those dishes were going to take him rather than, and for me to just go back in the past and do dishes I cannot do à la carte at Daniel because they are often too complicated, mm-hmm. and also it's not something you cook in a degustation menu for 2 people, you know what I mean? But the duck we do sometime on request, the duck à la presse. So this is a duck à la presse. So you have, we start with the duck there, and you know, the duck has been, of course, with the blood inside the lungs, the heart, and we leave the heart, the liver, the lungs, and most of the blood inside. And it's a classic old recipe, but the story about the press you have on the right, and the gentleman turning the press, is the one who brought me that press. And the press is from the 20s at the 30s at the 21 Club, where they had a lot of press like this. And a lawyer from Cleveland took a press, bought the press there, and took it back to Cleveland and played with it for his friends with all kind of birds he was pressing, because he was, you know, a lawyer slash cook, and or at least amateur. And then he died, and his daughter, who is in her 70s, and my friend Joel Buckman, which is, I would say, my best customer. He ate at Daniel for the last 20 years, once or twice a week.
Amazing.
And he's a retired lawyer. And now he's cooking his own meal, because he come in the morning and work with the chef, and then go home, change, and come back for dinner. He loves to cook. He's a retired lawyer, and he loves to cook, and he come whenever he wants, and he goes. It's like family to us. And Joel was with that lady, and he was talking to her, and she was telling her the story of the press was in the basement for 20 years, 25 years, because her husband passed away, her father passed away. And so Joel went down to the basement, picked up the press, and took the recipe of the gentleman. And we invited the lady, after a month, we made some tests and see if that was going to be good. And we invited the lady to come for dinner, and she was in tears for having her father's press back on the road again.
You know, so often when people set out to make a cookbook, you know.
So that dish I learned when I was 14. I didn't do it, but I learned because I watched it doing it. And we will do that during the truffle season and the morel season, and it's stuffed with morel and truffle and herbs. And then the second farce around is made with all the innards, the heart, the liver, heart, liver, and mostly.
I mean, it's like
foie gras.
You know, everyone, when they set out to make a book, they say like, oh, I want to do something different or, you know, unconventional. Mm-hmm. but it's so successful here. It's crazy. Like
This is crazy. This, you know, as a cook, I've seen in France, I learned to make chartreuse. Chartreuse is basically you take a charlotte mold, which is the shape of the root vegetable here, and you line it with cabbage leaves, and you fill it up with braised cabbage, and you put a whole pheasant in it, and you cover it, and you bake it. Or you do that in a cocotte, but en chartreuse. And I felt like, well, you know, I just to kick ass with Bill, I said, we're going to try to make a chartreuse he has never seen in France, because I was trying to show him stuff he didn't see in Lyon yet. And so the bottom part is baked potatoes were chunky with foie gras and dove, little dove. So there's 4 kind of birds. So there's dove breast who are roasted, like you see on the top right up there, there's the little fillet of dove, like the 8 fillet there. And then wrap up with the bacon, so this whole thing get baked independently, and with the cabbage leaves. And then inside the root vegetable is it's lined with cabbage leaf as well, but inside is the braised cabbage, and there's a layer of pheasant. You see on the right, the top one is partridge. We have woodcock, partridge, woodcock, and pheasant, and the inside and around is the braised cabbage. So you see lining up the things in the mold there, in the bottom left pictures, and then the top one is a small cabbage stuffed like a chou farci, but with all the innards from all the game birds. And then there's the head of the bécasse, because the woodcock, the best is the brain. So you split the head in half and you scoop the brain. And that's one of the few birds who has brain. Because it's a very smart bird, and those birds, I catch them from, I have a lot of friends who are hunters. So they bring them to me. We don't sell them, we just eat them for ourselves. And so they go from Newfoundland, and they migrate all the way down to Texas and Louisiana or further. And so when they pass over, we can start to shoot them by Vermont, and then New Jersey. They pass in New Jersey and all that. So they, if the weather is nice, they stay around. And so here is the chicken, roasted chicken stuff. But the other one is chicken in a pig bladder. So this is very Lyonnais, classic. So before sous vide, they had pig bladders in France. And so you fill up the pig bladder. If you see on the top bottom right, it's filled with Madeira, truffle juice. We have Madeira, truffle juice, and a concentrated sort of chicken stock seasoning. And then the chicken is covered with truffle under the skin. And then we push the whole chicken inside, and then we blow the. If you buy the book, you'll see more steps. We blow the pig bladder. So in France, pig bladder, when you kill a pig, we have tripier where they clean the pig bladder. I mean, it still smells, but they still clean it well. And then after they blow them and they let it dry. And once they are very dry, they make a wallet with it. You know what I mean? They fold them. So you can find a little piece of things like this. You let it soak, and when it's nicely soaked, it starts to
It should be
expand.
mentioned that you cannot really find those in America. So those...
Not yet, but I'm sure we're going to try to make it work. I just have to find a pig farm where we can make our own pig bladder. And this because I'm from Lyon. Back up once. Because I'm from Lyon, charcuterie is very important for me, and I even dedicated a restaurant on the charcuterie program, Bar Boulud. And so to make a great classic pâté en croûte with an old-fashioned presentation, when I was an apprentice, every terrine we present, we had the gelée made, of course, a gelée of the meat we were making. We made a gelée, and you have to make it a little firm so you can chop it. So you put the gelée, the pieces, and when you try to chop gelée with a knife, it goes all over. So you have to put that in a towel, and then with the knife, with not cutting too much, you go inside with a towel like this, and you chop it very finely like that. So anyway, that was just a classic pâté en croûte. And then this is a pot-au-feu feast, where it's basically 10 different meat cooked in 10 different ways, 7 different ways. Pot-au-feu for me, it's I love to have a pot-au-feu, but when you start with a consommé with the truffles inside and root vegetable, and then you go meat by meat, the cured meat first, and then the bird meat, and then the white meat, and then the red meat. And so we have some white meat as veal shank, like fricadelle with the livers, but also veal tongue and veal breast. And then there's a pot-au-feu on the left, which is the rare filet of beef with the marrow bones and all that. And then on top is the short ribs and the beef shank. There in the middle, there's more foie gras, a pot-au-feu of foie gras, and then duck, whole duck and foie gras. And there's on the right more like innards pot-au-feu there. And yeah, so it's you have to have a big family, and you have to stay a long time at the table.
You know, you said you wanted to show Bill some dishes that he hadn't seen in Lyon yet. And you know, certainly I had never seen a lot of those, but who has seen these dishes recently? Who has eaten these dishes?
Well, we ate them after, that's for sure. Yeah, nothing went to waste. The staff was happy during the session. But I have seen and I've made dishes all my life like this, but I never really made a fuss about it. And I made a show for a while, which maybe you have seen and you can still catch on Hulu or I don't know, maybe YouTube or Hulu. It's called After Hours with Daniel. And and it was fun because they came to me and said, "Oh, Daniel, we'd love to do a show with you." So nobody ever came to me and said they want to do a show because they didn't know what to do with me, the French guy, don't speak English too well. So and I said, well, if you want to do a show, what I'm good is to invite friends after work and throw a party for them. I was telling Chris earlier that one time I had a Japanese chef who came from Japan and cooked a meal for 16 chefs because he wanted to cook for me, but I said to him, I'm sorry, you're not going to cook only for me if you come all the way to Japan to cook. So I invite everybody after work, and we made a big meal, we stay until 3 o'clock in the morning from 11 o'clock at night, and we had this master chef in Japan who cooked for us an amazing meal, and they were only chef at the table. And then...
well, tell them about his day, that chef's day, starting at 3 a.m. to cook you that
Yeah,
meal.
I know, because he was in south of Japan. He drove to Tokyo that morning. He went to Tsukiji Market and came with like $5, big cooler box. He went to Tsukiji Market in the fish market in Tokyo and bought all the seafood and everything he need. Then he took the plane at noon, and when you go from Tokyo to New York, you leave at noon, you arrive at noon, so it's pretty good, the same day. So he arrived the same day at noon in New York, and he went right back at Daniel and started his mise en place for us. It was very cool. So after hours, when they ask me, I say, well, what am I going to do? I'm going to cook for friends. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go to see friends. It don't matter who it is, small restaurant, big restaurant, and we're going to cook a meal for ourselves. Chefs. So I invited always local chef. I invited a food critic, but unless he was the city food critic and he didn't want to show his face. And I invited always a movie star, a sports star, movie star. They were. We kept it low key, but I always cook big dishes, big. Sort of dish made for a feast. And so that was the idea of that also in the book, a little bit.
It's sort of, Bill, in the book, and says something that I thought was really interesting in sort of like doing the chartreuse, the sort of pheasant stuffed dish. He says, if cooking knowledge is not carefully passed from one generation to the next, it doesn't last. And you've got these cooks in your restaurant who have never seen these. You passing it on and doing it, the act of you cooking it, being one of the few, I think, chefs in America who have ever done it is a really important act. And I think that, like, does it have that value to you? Like, are you passing this to your next generation of
Well, in a
cooks?
sense, I think I'm passing a message mostly because there's so many more recipes I could do. And like, for example, in France, we have this competition called Meilleur Ouvrier de France. And Meilleur Ouvrier de France, you have to enter. So there's about 1,000 chefs who enter that. And it's all regional competition at the beginning, and they get a subject. They get one recipe, and it's the same for everybody, and it's from Escoffier, but after that is how the chef interpret the recipe, the most closest to the interpretation of to the making of the, because the old recipe are not always, there's gray area a little bit. And last time, I had a chef who was trying to do it, so and that's the first passage. There's 2 other passages before you get to the end. And there was a timbale of macaroni. So macaroni is basically a large pasta with a hole in the middle, and what we call in French at least. And you had to line the timbales with that. And then after you stuff it inside with cockscomb and sweetbreads and rooster's bowl, you know, the white bowl inside the what we call the sometime chicken has eggs inside,
like the little pre-eggs,
pre-eggs kind of, and all kind of tongues, and I mean there were a lot of innards inside that pasta, and then you have to make a special sauce and all that, and then you have to unmold it, and you have to glaze it, and all that. So the dish sounds fairly simple, but the application, the application is the nightmare, because they don't tell you what mold to use, they don't tell you what pasta to use, they don't tell you anything about the technique, and then during the process of the elimination, they keep changing dishes, and they keep basically every year out of it 800 to 1,000 chefs. No, it's every 4 years, and you can pass that. And they keep about 6 to 10 of them. So it's pretty hard. And I think it's what French cuisine is about. And so those dishes was the message for me to say what French cuisine for me is about, what it represents, the guts of it, the history of it. There's one with the calfheads who date from early 1800, and for example, the duck à la presse, the press duck. I made the duck press for Anne Whelan, and we all wonder where it come from. And Anne Whelan, if you don't know, is the lady who had La Varenne School, and she just wrote a new book, we should all buy it. It's called One Soufflé at a Time. And she's an amazing lady. She was after Julia, but yet lived with Julia in France and with Simone Beck and all the great ladies of America who really, but she's English, but she mostly lived in France and then she lives in California now, in Los Angeles. And you should interview this lady, Chris. You don't know her, Anne Whelan?
I've not met her, no.
She's incredible. She has the biggest, maybe, collection of cookbook going back to 1300 or 1400. And so after she had the duck à la presse, she sent me an email and showed me the first recorded pressed duck who came from 1400 and something. I don't remember the chef, I have the paper, but where it was kind of this wood press, open wood press, and there was a duck with the head and the legs on each side, and the duck was getting squeezed in the middle. And it was all like kind of drawn so to me I have a lot of old cookbooks. I have books back to 1780, 1765, and it's in old French, so you have to kind of guess the word sometime. But it's fascinating. I still learn things. I'm still interested by that.
Yeah, those duck presses, I think, are going to be the hot Christmas item. But the classic
Well,
ones.
if you go to Christophe, it's going to cost you $12,000. So
Yeah,
it's
and
either a
then-
car or a dog press.
And then the silver plated like Christophe
Yeah.
ones can be like $100 grand, like
The most beautiful one I've ever seen is in Belgium at Comme Chez Soi. The whole thing is about, I don't know, it's about 6 foot long. It has all kind of containers to put the garnish, and it's all silver brass, everything, the legs, the wheels, the layers, the underneath, the cloche. I mean, it's just
It makes me
crazy.
so nostalgic for like this idea of my credit card just fell out of my pocket of these like I love these like utensils that have one purpose. Like this
Yeah,
is a thing
absolutely.
to squeeze the blood out of a duck.
Yeah.
It's
So,
amazing to me.
For a while, chef became creative, and they were squeezing lobster head to get the juices of the lobster head and finish the sauce with it.
And then but there's like the turbo dish which has a pan that's specifically cooked for one fish.
Exactly. The turbo dish, which you saw, the turbo soufflé before, and it has sort of a, what is it? A lozenge.
Yeah, lozenge shaped.
Lozenge
pan.
shaped. And I was very lucky because I bought the turbo first, and there's a lady who wrote the book, My Last Supper. My Last Supper was by Mélanie Dunet, pardon, excuse-moi. She'll be very upset if I don't remember her name. and Mélanie had the turbotière. And so I don't know how it came about, and I found out that she had a turbotière because I was looking for, I didn't have one myself, but I wanted to cook a big turbo soufflé like this. So basically you lift the fillet of the turbo and then you stuff them with, I wanted to do something more Provençal to the spirit of the recipe. So stuff with lobster tails and tomatoes and basil leaves and a farce of turbo on top, and then the little tomato and zucchini and chive and black olive as a motif on top. And the sauce is made, of course, with the lobster was inside, with some tomato into it and some spice to make it a classic sort of bisque, but a little bit more refined than that.
I will say, like editorially, in the editor world, Bill Buford is sort of legendarily unreliable for turning things in, and so it's kind of like.
Well, he has been 2 years behind on his books.
Yeah. And I think it's like.
So it'll be good. And I think the book, unless he changed the title, is going to be called Dirt.
And it's about French cooking.
It's about the French. So imagine how much dirt you're going to get out of that.
Yeah, I think that the standing policy with Bill at the New Yorker is, you'll get a story from me whenever I give it to you, and so I think that.
And that's why he wrote a piece about our work. He was asked to write a piece about our work, and because he know them well at the New Yorker, it was sort of the introduction to the work we did.
And I think
it was very cool.
Like his contribution in this book is fantastic, and I think I have to hand it over to people to ask questions here. But I did want you to talk about one.
And then,
last
by the
thing.
way, there's the last part of the book, who might reassure you that you could also buy the book, is that I live right above Daniel. And so I have my home recipe as well. And so here I am cooking a roast of pork. So I choose 4 regions of France. This is Alsace. And so you have a tarte flambée with mushroom. And there's, of course, a wonderful, no, I don't think they're coordinated this, but this is Normandy on the right, the apple pie. But also a roast of pork with cabbage, and inside the blue pot there's bake-off, what we call bake-off, which is layers of turnips and cabbage cooked in wine with some butters and bacons and let it bake gently.
And this is literally directly, he lives above the restaurant.
Right. So I made a home section with 4 regions, Normandy, I had Normandy, Lyon, Alsace, and Provence. Voilà, this is Provence, part of it. No, this is Lyon on top there.
I did want to ask you, you divided this part of the book, the home cooking part, into 4 French regions.
Yeah.
And the recipes.
Because I would have done 10 regions, but the publisher said no more page for 25. We already went to 2 editions of pages because she felt she could not cut off too much, especially our work with the iconic got carried away. And also, basically, she didn't want to shorten any of the ideas. And they did very well for that. But I stick to 4 regions. That was reasonable.
I did want to complain that this was hard to read on a plane, but it was.
So,
So I think we should turn it over to more qualified question askers out here in the audience if people have questions.
thank you. Thank you. By the way, I'm very excited to be in San Francisco. I was in San Francisco in 1981. When I was in Washington, I had time to travel, and I did the town up and down in the trains, and spent a lot of time in Chinatown. And today, my daughter is living here. She's 24. So 31 years ago, I was here. And now she's 24, and she's living in San Francisco, and she said, Dad, I'm not going back to New York. I love you too much.
Okay, the first question's on the left here.
Bonsoir, Daniel. Merci
Bonsoir,
d'être
monsieur.
avec nous. Thank you very much.
Merci.
We're flattered and honored to be here in this room.
Thank
My
you.
question is in 2 parts. The first one, my little sister here would like to know, when you'll go back to France to open a Daniel Boulud restaurant near Lyon, will you have quenelle Nantua? And the second part of the question is, what's your feeling about the Michelin stars appreciation, whether it's in France or here in America,
understand.
which is slightly different? Thank you.
So the Lyon's question is then I always dreamed to go back to Lyon. I've not done it because my management team don't speak French. And they feel that I just want to, I don't know. I don't think they were okay. So what I want to do is to try to find a bouchon. And a bouchon in Lyon, and if I can, to put an American chef there to do the classic. That would be, I think, interesting. But at least for sure, I will one day get a little bouchon. It wouldn't be a Daniel Boulud restaurant. It's just going to be maybe a classic bouchon with his own name and leave it alone and just be a little hub for me there. The second question, Michelin. If the world don't always understand Michelin, chefs always dream of Michelin. And I think they make it sometimes difficult on yourself, but they are often, yeah, don't get too excited. We talk Michelin. But they are often very reliable because you have to kind of reading between the line with Michelin sometime. A 1-star can be a fantastic restaurant, or especially now, you have to read even greater between the line because it can be a very casual place and yet be a 1-star, or a more classic and refined place and be 1-star. In a 2-star is often a great place to be because you can compete with the 3. You don't want to go compete with the 1, but you can definitely compete with the 2 and compete with the 3. And so that's always exciting. And then when you're at 3-star, then you compete with yourself to make sure you keep them. But often it's what I live for when I learned to be a cook. I always wanted to work for a 3-star. I worked with Michel Guérard, I worked with Roger Verger, I worked with Georges Blanc. But as an apprentice, I started in a 2-star because I learned much more in a 2-star than in a 3. And if I was a young cook, I don't want to go to a 3-star and be relegated as cook number 35 or 25 because I don't know anything. And so, you know what I mean? There'll be 25 guys before me who know something. And I will rather go to a 1-star if I was a cook to start, a good one with a good chef. And then after, scale up, go to the 2 and then go to the 3.
Next question is up here.
But trust your judgment. Don't trust always the critics. You know what I mean? I think the most important thing is to trust your judgment, make an assessment, and understand the reason why you want to go to see that chef. And go back and see him more often. Because, you know, I think it's what makes a great restaurant is also loyalty with customer.
Next question is up here. Chef, to your left.
Yes?
Chef, at this point in your career, what percentage of your time do you spend actually creating dishes as opposed to being a CEO?
I'm not the CEO. I am, I'm basically, when you have many restaurants, and if I didn't have the ambition to open my own restaurant, I don't think I would have the ambition as I grow older to do more. I didn't want to settle where I am because, like I say, I wanted to shade things out of Daniel, and I didn't want to shade things out of me. I wanted to shade things out of Daniel. So I created more casual business, and always with the Daniel DNA. And of course, creating dishes is not. I don't know any chef of very high status who is the only and sole creator of everything he's doing. That is impossible. It's a teamwork. It's, you know, you select a chef de cuisine, you select, I have an executive chef, a chef de cuisine, I have corporate chef, I have a director of culinary communication where she communicates between me and my chef. If she always, we have a platform, an inside communication system where all the chefs can enter and see all the recipe we do in every restaurant and all the dishes we are done and the description of it. And they have access also of our database of recipe. Plus, they have access of communication with me on new dishes. So that fueled the imagination. And I think if a chef de cuisine cannot create a dish by himself as well in collaboration with his chef, then he shouldn't be the chef de cuisine. And so that means then all the dish we do, it's a collaborative effort. And sometimes it's 80% me because I bring the idea and they refine the idea. Sometimes it's 80% them because they brought that and I put my 20 cents in it. And 10 cents is often not enough. But, you know, we keep working at it. And not every dish make it a classic. Some dish come spontaneously during the season. We love the combination. We transform it the season after, and we keep transforming the combination if we like it. If we don't, we just move on. Okay. But the business is made of a pyramid. And there's the management team on top of the pyramid, and I am right in the middle where I communicate with the top, I communicate with the bottom, with all the chefs and the restaurant and the managers. So in a way, I'm not sitting on top of the pyramid as the one who is taking care of everything. Above me, there is a lot of talented people who, I mean, I'm not a CEO, I'm not a COO, I'm not a CFO, I'm none of that.
Okay, we have time for one more question. However, I just want to say that thank you for giving us your emails. So we have the winner for a pair of tickets. Anna Mindus, come see me after the program out in the lobby. Thank you. Last question.
Okay. Hi, thank you for being here tonight. I'm over here.
Thank you.
Over on the left.
There. Yes, thank you.
I have a technical question about canals.
Yes, you go back to the canal.
Well, because we were talking about them tonight. So pike is the normal fish that I've read in every cookbook. So in California, we don't really have pike. And so I'm curious, it's a two-part question.
But in the Northern Lake, you have some, not too far.
Well, I've never seen it in a fish store in anywhere in San Francisco.
Yeah.
So I do know enough about cooking that the fish that I use is going to have to absorb the cream in the proper way. Mm-hmm. So my first question is, what local San Francisco fish I can use? And the second thing is, any technical advice to make them come out as light and fluffy as I remember them?
You must be from Lyon. Well, it's true, and we have walleye pike here, but it's not always the same type of pike who contain a certain strength in the meat to be able to absorb the cream. And as you, the more you add cream, and I was even in Lyon, I learned to add butters, and then after it's basically the quenelle. After it's better when it's with a scoop and you put it in a little bit of flour and you roll it by hand and poach it carefully. But it become, when you cook it in a sauce naturelle, it become like a souffle. It become 3 times the size, and it's airy and it's beautiful. But the fish here, I mean, the best is the walleye pike, but otherwise I will try to, I don't know, because you can do it with salmon or anything, but it's never the same. You don't have that strength in the meat. Who actually sturgeon to eat as a steak or as a fish is not so pleasant. In quenelle, it's delicious. So I'm sorry. I tried to think about it in what I've done, but maybe putting a little bit of fresh eel inside another maybe yellow white pike that will give a little bit of strength to that. Why not? No, too soft. Yeah. It's too. That wouldn't work. But if I have a good recipe of quenelle, I'll send you one.
We can all look forward.
Any more questions?
I think that was the last question. I think we're going to wrap it up now. You can ask more questions of Chef Boulud out in the atrium. So thank you, audience. Thank you, Chris Ying.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Chef Boulud.
That's the first. Yeah. Hello. Yeah. That's the first time I've been so honored by a big crowd in San Francisco. So, thank you.